Hi, Adam. My name is Thomas. How are you doing today?
Great. I'm doing great. I'm seeing all the Beatles posters behind you. So
Yeah, they're my favorite band. I have a very unhealthy obsession with them.
you watch Paul McCartney on Saturday Night Live?
As much as I'd love to talk about the Beatles, believe me, I would love to. We're here to talk about Seven Veils. I saw it a year and a half ago at the world premiere of TIFF, and I got to rewatch it last night. So I'm very excited to finally talk to you about this. My first question, kind of like what I just said, I saw it a year and a half ago at the premiere, and now it's finally releasing in a couple weeks. There's been a lot of buildup. There's been a lot of screenings at film festivals. I know you guys did Berlin as well last year. What's it like to finally bring it out to the world to see now?
I've never had to wait so long. It's been an incredible kind of like, and there are a lot of reasons behind that. But so it's interesting for me as well to go back to it. Like I went to a screening at the university about a week ago, and I watched it with a group of people. And it was just so important to watch it again with a group of people because I think as a filmmaker, you kind of move on. You're onto a different space, but you understand this was a very unique, unusual film, and I felt like recharged and kind of. I think I would have felt different if I hadn't gone back to that screening and kind of watched it with an audience because it's all ultimately about that, right? It's about how it is ultimately able to communicate with viewers, right? You
Yeah.
take this really, specific experience that I've had and this relationship to this play and this opera, and I've been living with it for such a long time, right? I first presented the play, the opera, so long ago, and this film was such an act of passion and will, and working with Amanda was so great, and but it has to, you can't abstract it. When you talk about it, you have to located in what it feels like to watch it with a group of people.
Yeah, definitely. And definitely, I love to hear that you feel that way because, like you said, it has been a long time since this movie premiered and now it's only finally releasing. I've never seen an opera tackled like this, especially in a movie. I'm curious, how long have you wanted to tackle opera and maybe just Salome very specifically in one of your movies? How long has that been a passion of yours?
Well, I first put on this opera in 1996, so it's like almost 30 years ago. And from the moment I put it on, like I did this project between two other films of mine, like Exotica and Sweet Hereafter. And this film, this production, always felt like it was part of a trilogy in terms of what it was dealing with. So I I, I knew that I wanted to, and I did keep dealing with it because it was being remounted all the time. But I felt that uh, when I thought of this idea of actually making a film around the remounting of this particular production and about taking all the themes of this story and bringing them into the current day through these, you know, host of different characters. Like I got super excited about that. Like and especially this idea of Amanda playing Janine, the main character, the person who's remounting the show and her relationship to the previous production and her history. That just became really rich, and I it was a dream come true, really. Like that this project all came together the way it did.
Oh, for sure. And the way you talk about Amanda, she's incredible in this movie. She gives such a visceral performance. And I know you've worked with her again and in this, but one of my favorite things I want to talk about her performance is the voiceovers that we hear throughout the movie. And I think that's honestly one of the strongest parts of her performance. It's very hard for an actor to bring so much emotion and power through just voice. So I'm curious, as a director, when you're recording those voiceovers, how do you manage to get the best out of your actors to evoke that emotion, knowing that you're not going to see them physically on screen and it's just their voice?
Well, I think first of all, it's essential. I mean, in this case, that we've already shot the scenes, and she knew that the camera was going to be just on her face. That she's not using the voiceover to describe like actions, but she's describing things that she's feeling, but she's already
Mhm.
performed, right? So she had a sense of what the voiceover was as she was acting. So she's had a lot of time to kind of sit with it, and then she's speaking the voiceover as she's watching her performance, right? So it's a very specific way that it's laced into the film. It's not like she's just reading a story. It's a story that she knows that she's performed those thoughts, and then she's watching that as she's actually recording the voiceover. So it
Yeah.
gives it a special. It's not like a lot of the time voiceover is used as a way of explaining things or It's kind of detached, but in this one, it's really embedded, especially because in the voiceover, a lot of it, she's watching something on the screen. She's watching something else. So it's like there's already that level of mediation. So it's very layered. It's very layered.
Yeah, for sure. And the way you talk about explaining things, that actually kind of leads into my next question. Honestly, probably my favorite part about this movie is how you use the character of Clea as almost like a perspective for the audience. The way she records the vlogs, the way she interviews everyone involved, as well as providing exposition for the Plaid family, the history of it. Um, how did that come into play, and how did you make it work into the script so well, the way you did?
It's interesting because that is part of what you do as a director now. You have to do this social media, well, like we're doing, but as part of the opera show, you're expected, to make it more accessible to people. But that thing about the making of John the Baptist's head as a props person, that I saw that online with a production that was in London, at the Royal Opera, and it was really interesting to see it as a kind of a piece of, well, how do you make that head? So that became the inspiration, and also the fact that she's again she's our way of entering into a story in case you don't know it, right? She's like there to lead you through because it's you don't need to know anything about opera to watch this movie. Like in some ways, like I have to keep telling that to people because like it's not an opera film. It's really just using it as a work environment, as a space to tell this other story with all these different characters. But if you are going to kind of have an opera, Salome is a really simple story. It's basically about a woman who wants, this guy really desperately wants to kiss his head, his lips. He refuses, so she, like beheads him so she can hold the head so she can kiss it. Like it's crazy, but it's really simple in terms of the plot and extreme. So Clea, the character, is just there to kind of like find the humor of that a bit. She's kind of like very light, because it is a crazy love story. Like as she said, it's like you can't think of anything more so like extreme, but she kind of makes it accessible. But then she has to deal with her own kind of story of violence in the movie. So
Yeah, with
that's
Johan. Yeah.
yeah. But I think what's interesting is that in the work environment, like a lot of the things that are being explored in this movie, like in the opera world, a lot of those issues still exist. Like it's just because of the emotional and physical space that singers put themselves into. There's a lot of adrenaline. There's a lot of kind of feeling that they're superhuman, and so that allows them to do certain things that you wouldn't be able to get away with in normal society. And so that was something I've observed working in opera, and so I wanted to bring that into the story itself.
That's wonderful to hear, and I think you explained everything great about it. The cinematography in this movie is some of my favorite from your filmography, and some of the most impressive shots are the way you use shadows to actually portray scenes from the opera. And as a director and as someone who's very interested in filmmaking, I'm curious, what's it like to actually shoot those scenes? Because I'd imagine it's very difficult. Make sure nothing you don't want in the shadows is in frame. Make sure the lighting's right. Could you tell me a bit about shooting those scenes and the process of it?
Well, so thanks for observing that. Because the theatrical show is using theatrical lighting,
Mhm.
and because theatrical lighting is pretty extreme, that gave us permission to go that way with our cinema lighting, right? Like, so I'm not sure if you'd be able to get away with this if you didn't have it against the context of what's happening on stage. But to then have that creep into the way other scenes are shot and certainly the way the camera is moving, because I also knew that I didn't want it to look like, like an opera on film type thing. I wanted it to have its own distinct feel. And so it's not just in terms of how it looks in terms of light and contrast, but also how the camera moves through that darkness and how it kind of is able to find this way of expressing itself. But you have to, when you do something that's that extreme with the visual language, there has to be you have to give yourself license to do that, and it's really based on the theatrical lighting, right? There are moments where we're going further than you would ever go because we have this reference in the film to the way it looks on stage, which is like very almost like expressionistic. It's almost like kind of I don't know, like I was looking at early films like Cabin of Dr. Caligari, or these kind of like these really expressionistic sort of ways of using the camera. Um, yeah, I love that. I mean, I think that, you have to find a way of, using film creatively to express yourself, because it's so easy to make films that just look like every other film. I mean, we all experience that, right? You watch Netflix, or you watch, like, there's just a language, and there's a way these stories are told, and it becomes really drab, you know. And so you need to find a way to get the viewer excited, and get yourself excited about what you're doing visually. Like, film is a visual medium. I mean, it goes without saying,
Very
but
much so.
sometimes a lot of people don't treat it that way, weirdly enough. Yeah.
No, a lot of people don't. I very much agree. And to follow up on that, it might even just be one of the shadow shots, or it might be just one of the very cool tracking shots you have going through the entire workspace. Is there a shot in this movie you consider to be your favorite, and if so, why? Even if it's one of the shadow ones.
Well, I can tell you that some of the stuff that gets most exciting when you're on a film set is the stuff that you just think of at the last moment. So there was this moment where, we were shooting the dancers behind the screen, and we're playing it out. But then I thought, wouldn't it be cool if Amanda was actually in that shot? Like, so she was moving amongst the dancers, and so all that shadow show that's happening behind her, like, we see her absorbing it, like, in this way, and the camera operator like immediately understood like what was happening, and Amanda certainly got it, and it was just this shot that we did very spontaneously. But I look at it now, I go, wow, that's probably one of the strongest shots, because you feel the spontaneity, you feel that all these things are being fused together, between the physicality of the shadows, between the fact that you're seeing the dancers generating the shadows, and that you're seeing her in that space generating her memory of what really inspired all of that. So, so it's intercut with all this stuff in the forest on video. So there's the crudeness of the video, the sharpness of the shadow, the physicality of the dancers, and then there's just the way the camera is able to harness all that and find its way. It kind of ends with this image of her, and you see on the side this projector, a film projector, and I love that moment, and that the film projector is actually physically installed in this shot. So you have this old analog technology, this digital camera that we're using, this really old kind of like process of shadow show. So just all those things fused, like, it's pretty exciting to me. Like, it's
That,
it's at the end of the dance, right?
yeah,
To enjoy
that's
that.
great. I love that. I love the way you talk about the way you fuse everything together because it doesn't happen as often as it should, I believe, in cinema. I think it's
Well, it's rare that you actually, have all of these elements, like, to play with as well, right? Like, that's one of the things that I found, like, for that moment. And as I say, it wasn't designed. Like, we didn't go into that shooting day thinking, okay, this is one of the shots. It's just suddenly we were there, and everyone understood what we could do, and you can feel that spontaneity and that creative kind of energy.
great. And just my last question before I go. I know you mentioned that Salome is very much a passion project for you to adapt to a story in one of your movies, but I'm curious, is there any other opera you would consider adapting in the same way of Seven Veils? Like almost as like just like the set, like the workplace, and if so, which one would it be?
I know, because most opera stories are super complicated, and you have to actually uh it's tricky, because you have to tell the opera story. You have to let people know what the opera story is, and then know what the story is that it's working against. I mean, I guess you could say that you can do that with film, like Carmen and La Boheme, like, and those are more accessible. But in a way, we've seen versions of those being told, like Baz Luhrmann, and like, there are these versions that are already told. No, I love working on opera. I'm about to go into another opera project now, which is another really intense story, but I have no desire to actually do the same thing. I think this was really specific to Salome, and specific to that character, and specific to what I knew Amanda could bring to it. So it was like a very singular kind of vision. And frankly, it was really tough to get the film made. So I'm not you have to, when you make a film, you have to convince people that it's going to be a great idea. And this one I knew could work, because the opera story was so simple. Most opera stories are not simple, and so therefore it kind of becomes even more challenging.
It's very good. Look, to give me the wrap, I just want to say this has been such an honor for me. Your contributions to Canadian cinema do not go unnoticed. This is very important to me. So I just want to say thank you again for taking the time to speak with me. I can't wait for everyone else to see this movie, and I can't wait to speak with you again at the red carpet next week.